It took me a while to finally get to the primary source. He's a guy that I call Alan Beam in the book. It's a pseudonym. It's not his real name. And I finally got him on the phone. He was terrified.
With good reason. I mean,
he was being hounded by attorneys for Boies Schiller Flexner, David Boies' law firm, which was representing Theranos.
There's also has represented some other colorful characters.
Right. And they were trying to get him to delete emails that he had sent to himself to his Gmail account, trying to get him to sign an affidavit on top of the non-disclosure agreements he'd already signed. And he had hired a lawyer who unfortunately wasn't very qualified for this sort of situation and was giving him bad advice. And he was really afraid. And so it took me a while to get him comfortable. And I granted him confidentiality, promised to keep his identity a secret.
On a technical basis, when you grant somebody like that, and I'm sure people who are not journalists are curious as to how this works, because it does seem like a superpower, like, hey, I'm going to give this person immunity. How do you know that person doesn't have an axe to grind and is duping you to try to get out of sight of the story? What's the protection for a journalist? And then do you have to tell your editors who the source is? And then does that open up more issues? How does that work off the record sources?
Yeah, no, these are good questions. I mean, it's a gamble, I would say, on the part of the reporter and the source.
That it stays confidential.
Right, because the source doesn't necessarily know you and doesn't know that you're a man of your word. And so you have to explain to them, like I do often, that I've been doing this for a while and that I've dealt with whistleblowers and confidential sources many times during my career, that I'm always true to my word. Because, in my line of work, you have to play the long game. If you burn one source, then your career is over.
And in fact, this second source is the one that tipped you off.
Yes.
The blog.
The pathology blogger was the first tip, but then the primary source, the source who was able to give me information that was primary information from which I could start building my reporting, was an ex-Theranos employee. And so he had to trust me, and he made that gamble and trusted me, and I made the gamble that he was who he said he was and that he had the job. I mean, I had obviously researched him.
You had to verify some of those things.
Looked him up and everything, and it all added up. And I knew that if I didn't get him to talk to me, then all I had were rumors and innuendo and, second and third hand speculation. You can't build a story on that. And so I made a quick decision, which was to grant him anonymity, and I promised to shield his identity. And then he started confiding in me and unburdening himself. And I learned at that point in our first conversation, which lasted about an hour, that Theranos had a device named the Edison that actually handled only a small fraction of the 250 blood tests on its menu, and that about 240 of the 250 tests were done with just regular commercial machines bought from third-party manufacturers, with one twist, which was that a lot of those other 240 tests were done on one particular Siemens machine that Theranos had hacked to uphold the myth that it could test tiny samples of blood pricked from a finger.
Even though the manufacturer said, no.
Right. One of the ways that they hacked the machine and adapted it to small samples was to dilute the blood in a saline solution to create more volume, because, of course, these commercial machines were used to handling regular-sized blood samples.
Right.
So a lot more volume. And so to create more volume to make the machine work, they diluted it. And when you dilute the blood, that creates problems. There's already a dilution step in the Siemens machine's protocol. So
so now diluting dilution.
You're double diluting. You're diluting the analytes that you're trying to measure in the blood. You're making their concentration so low by diluting the blood that it's way below even the analytical measurement range that the FDA has approved. So you're using the machine in a way that neither the manufacturer...
They hacked an old machine that they should not have done against the manufacturer's warranty, and they were deceptive, and the deception's just beginning.
As a result, the results from that hacking are unreliable.